The last topic we discussed today is inflation. So what is that about? Inflation. And I think you have heard that term before. But basically, that is the value of the currency, the value of currency. Decreases. So the value of currency decreases, we call that inflation. The opposite of inflation is deflation. Deflation. And that is the opposite of inflation, basically. Which means that the value of currency increase. So inflation, normally in the normal economy, we have inflation, deflation. When we are in recessions, then it may experience deflation. So let's have a few terms before we have the equation for determining the inflated interest rate. The first one, how to consider the inflation in our evaluating of the project alternatives. First, we discussed what is the real or inflation-free interest rate. If we call I at a real or inflation-free interest rate, and call that EI. And then call the market or also call it inflated, right? Market inflated interest rate. So the interest rate that consider the inflation, call that IF. I sub F, inflated interest rate. And the last one, if we call the inflation rate EF. EF. Then the market or inflated interest rate IF is equal to the real or inflation-free interest rate I plus inflation rate F plus the products of I times F. So that the inflated interest rate that we consider both the interest rate that we want to, it's real, and the inflation rate. So to evaluate project, instead if we consider inflation, instead of use I, we use IF, and that equation there. If go back to your FE reference, the first page, as you can see, inflation, it defined by that. D, in this case they use D, and D equal to I plus F plus product IF. So go back to there, so in the equation in the reference that you have there. And of course that let me take a note here, that also call that D in FE reference. And now the exam reference 2. So keep that in mind, the difference. So let's go to work on problem 2, the last problem. And of course you have additional practice problem that you should practice with the solution available. We have 2 in today. So let's work problem 2 here. Abbott Chemical wants to determine whether it should pay now or pay later for upgrading its production facility. If the company select action plan A, the necessary equipment will be purchased now. That is the keyword, right? Now for 20,000. However, if the company select inactions, The equipment we purchase will be deferred 3 years when the cost is expected to rise 30,000. The non-inflation adjusted real MAR is 12%. Inflation rate is 6%. Determine whether the company should purchase now or later. So it should be action plan A or in action plan I. When the inflation is not considered and when inflation is considered. So let Onway draw the diagram, cash flow diagram, so that you can see the plan I and plan A. What is the difference? Plan A now, buy now. So just say that in years, and you buy now for 20,000. 20,000. So that is basically plan A, action plan A. And now the other scenarios that you can do is years. You don't buy now, you defer your actions and buy 3 years later. 1, 2, 3. 2, 3. And buy at that time equal to 30,000. And that is the plan I, in action plan I. The question is which one we should prefer using when inflation is not considered. When inflation is not considered, then you don't need to look at the inflation rate of 6%. We only work on the real MAR, 12%. And when the problem don't say anything, you can use any of the method, net present value, internal rate of return, and benefit cost analysis to evaluate and determine which alternative should we use. My suggestion for you, when the problem don't say anything, use net present value. That is the most straightforward way. And I'm going to use that in here. So first A, inflation is not considered. Then, of course, the I that we work on is the MAR, 12%. Then we have the, and like I said, we use the NPV method. So in this case, we have NPV for alternative A. That is the present value now. And we buy for plan A, now it's 20,000. So we don't have to do any conversion. It is negative 20,000. And you can see there. And then B, we have NPV B, net present value. We have to bring that to time 0. What is equivalent of that? Spend 30 years, 30,000, 3 years from now, 2 time now. So we can have negative, as you can see, that is 30,000. The factor is P over F, given F by P, and that is not considered, so it's only the MAR, 12% for 3 years. And from that one, we have that is the 30,000 divided by that factors equal to 1 plus 12% power 3 over that. So this one equal to negative 21,353.41. And this one is negative. You spend less in NPV A than NPV B. So you can see the NPV A greater than NPV B, which is you spend less with the plan A. Then we choose plan A. Okay, so that is the first. The second scenario, when we consider inflation. Inflation is considered. And when inflation is considered, we need to first determine what is the inflated interest rate. Inflated interest rate. And we go to this equation. Or also consider market interest rate. I plus F plus I times F. And again, that equation available on the FE reference. F here, I plus F plus I times F. I mark 12% inflation, F 6%. So you have that equal to 12%, 0.12. You have to put that in decimal. 0.06, 6% plus 12 times 0.06, and that equal to 0.1872, and that is the IF equal to 18.72% per year, as you can see from here. And again, you have to put decimal form, not the percent, because that consistent with the unit. And similar, exactly the two equations, we just use the instead of math 12%, we turn that to 18.72%. So the same. NPVA remain unchanged because that you buy now, and that we're talking about the net present value, so it will be still 20,000. NPVB do similarly, it will be 30,000 divided by 1 plus I power n, so 1 plus I, instead of 12% in the scenario in part A, we have 0.1872 for 3 years, and that equal to 17,928.73. And between the here, as you can see, NPV B greater than NPVA. Look at the negative here. So we choose plan I, in action plan I, as you can see that. So plan I. So as you can see, for this problem to show you the effect of inflation, if you are not consider, you can choose plan A, but if you consider inflation, plan I. So it really inflation play a role in our selection of the method.